Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome to episode 45 of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
So we got a lot to get to today. We're talking about two sports specifically, one that just finished their season and one with the season that's just starting. After our SEC, we're going to talk about Super Bowl 55 and Tampa Bay's win and Tom Brady's legacy. And then Joshua Franks will join us to preview the NASCAR season and the Daytona 500, the Great American Race happening this weekend. But let's get started with a little SEC here. I'm going to start with my surprise. It's going to come from the Super Bowl. It's going to be the Tampa Bay Defense. We'll get more into this, but the fact that they were able to completely stifle Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes had some pretty solid throws. Don't get me wrong. It was pretty impressive, him evading and still being able to get decent throws off, but having to be constantly chased, nobody, not even Patrick Mahomes, can take advantage of that. It's the most pressures in any game in the NFL since 2018 from a defense. The Buccaneers and Todd Bowles, give him credit. He got them really prepared for this game, and they did a great job. My expectation here is that Leonard Fournette scored a touchdown. Next time Zoe Alter's on the show, we'll probably have to roast her because she said that Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, and Leonard Fournette, that none of them were going to score touchdowns. All three of them did in the Super Bowl. So my expectation, Leonard Fournette with a big play. And then in conclusion, I'm actually going to shift for a second over to the NBA because I think my conclusion here is that the New York Knicks have something clicking. I think there is finally some reason to be optimistic about this Knicks team. Bringing in Derrick Rose, he's played well so far, and he also hasn't taken away minutes from Emmanuel Quickly, which some people were kind of apprehensive about bringing in Rose since they're both point guards. Instead, they've moved Quickly over to the shooting guard position when Rose is in, and Quickly has been able to produce just as he was as a point guard. They did lose Mitchell Robinson to injury last night, so that's tough. Julius Randle, though, having an all-star caliber season. And if I'm the Knicks right now, I'd be pretty content. They're just outside a playoff spot, and they're winning some games. They're doing a good job against some tough teams. They beat the Bucks already this year. They beat Miami this year. They almost beat the Clippers. They're doing well against tough teams. And I think this is the best the Knicks have looked and really the most stable this team has seemed since the days of Carmelo Anthony and Jeremy Lin all the way back in 2013.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it feels like for the first time the Knicks have a little bit of consistency since that 2013 year. And, it's interesting, with all the success and improvement we're seeing with this young squad, Eddie, Knicks fans still want to trade for Bradley Beal. They want to give up 2 firsts and potentially Julius Randle just for a chance, who, by the way, has obviously been by far their best player on the floor day in and day out, just for a chance to get Bradley Beal if he becomes unhappy in Washington. And the other case scenario that they're thinking about is they want to give away maybe 2 seconds for Victor Oladipo. At this point, why? Don't even think about. I understand Randall's questioning, or I should say, they're questioning the future of Randall with the Knicks, considering the contract and that there's an opportunity or a chance that he may not return. But the Oladipo trade makes no sense unless you're giving up 2 seconds, because I think his deal is only 1 year, if I'm not mistaken. Beal, at least you have 2 years, but you have to prove to him that this team is going in the positive direction. And it is right now. But when you trade away Julius Randle, who's been the most positive player on the floor, I don't know about that. Don't get me wrong, Bradley Beal is a great player, but what is the difference then from the situation of Washington and then New York? It suddenly becomes no difference. In my opinion, there's more talent in Washington, considering the fact that he has Russell Westbrook. So to me, just makes no sense. Knicks fans are still in delusion, just like Stephen A. Smith is. But anyways, going on with my SEC, and I'm going to actually add on as well in terms of your surprise. You mentioned the Tampa Bay defense really being surprised. And I'm going to be honest, I knew this defense was good. I didn't know they could be that good against a bad offensive line. Considering all the injuries that went on with Kansas City that they had to deal with, the fact that D-line was able to dominate, penetrate, and create pressure on Mahomes on a consistent basis is something that shows how special that team is overall all around. To add on that linebacker core, guys like Devin White, who proved to be a superstar and by far not a bust in the draft of his respective draft class in that linebacker position, and Levante David, I mean, you look at those two; those are a dynamic duo, which I honestly only think could have been repeated a few years back with Luke Kuechly, as well as any other person that you put in the slot there for Carolina. I mean, right now, this team in particular has something special moving forward. And you're starting to see as well the defense and the offensive players on that team, Mike Evans in particular as well, talking about taking pay cuts to try to keep that team together. I think defensively, that is a great unit, by far surprising the Super Bowl. But soon enough, it'll become an expectation. Not my expectation this time, but it'll be an expectation next year that they keep up the same consistency. Otherwise, they'll fall apart. And the expectation going back to the Super Bowl, I expected the winner to score above 30 points. Well, I kind of got the score right on one end. I came the closest. The Buccaneers end up putting 31, but I really didn't expect the Kansas City Chiefs to come across with 9 points overall. But I'll say this: good offensive game from that, from Tampa Bay. They played great, owning possession, owning clock, and it was expected that one team was going to score a bunch, and it just happened to be Tampa Bay. It was still the most blown out of proportion game since I think the Denver game back in MetLife. But at the end of the day, it was still a good Super Bowl to watch, and it was high scoring for one side. But next year should be a lot better with a lot healthier players. And in conclusion, we could just seal the deal now. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time until Patrick Mahomes maybe gets to that level at the end of his career. That's a long conversation for another time and years from now. But just seal the deal. Let's stop talking about it. He is simply that great. And if you want to still have the Belichick debate, sure, we can go with that debate still, because I think there's a lot still going on with the Patriots that we just don't necessarily see. And I don't think Bill is as bad as a coach as what this year shows. But when it's all said and done, Tom Brady is not a system quarterback. He is the greatest, and 7 championships is special. And let's see if he can get number 8 next year. His kids gave him, a thumbs up to come back and play. And I mean, after that dime across, from boat to boat with the Lombardi, I think Brady's ready for next year already, Eddie.
Mm-hmm. And let's first talk a little about Bill Belichick, because everybody now is like, how much of the success is actually due to him? I don't think, just in my opinion, you have to go be that harsh against Bill Belichick. Sure, we've proven, like you said, that Tom Brady is not a system quarterback, but think about what Bill Belichick did as well. He made these Patriots teams great. I know Tom Brady did too, but let's think about it. This is the most talent Tom Brady has ever had on a team in 20 years. The Patriots have not had nearly this talent any of the 6 Super Bowl years. I think basically anyone can agree on that. Yes, Tom Brady definitely made that situation better, but I think Bill Belichick's coaching really did that as well. He was able to find players that maybe they weren't the best player, but they were committed to the Patriot way, and they were able to win, and they were able to win for many years. You can't underestimate how difficult it is to continue winning. And I know everybody's going to look at this year that does not look good for New England. Let's think about how bad this Patriots team is too. Cam Newton, I'm sorry, he is not a starting caliber NFL quarterback anymore. I know he's a former MVP, but he can't throw the ball anymore. He can still run, but he can't throw the ball. I'm sorry. I know this is the age of the running quarterback, but if you can't complete passes, you're not a starting quarterback in the National Football League. The Patriots have even fewer weapons on their offensive side than they've had really in any of these other years. They didn't have a healthy Julian Edelman, and all these other receivers, you didn't really know who they were. Some of them had decent years, but these weren't really big household names. And then the defense, I know they were so solid last year. This year, a lot of injuries. A lot of players also held out of the season because of COVID. The fact that they were still able to navigate that, get some wins, and finish the year at 7-9, I think was pretty impressive. But just talking a little more about the Super Bowl itself. People are going to say, we know already he's 43. No, Tom Brady is 43 years old. He's been doing this for 20 years. And yes, credit to the defense, but Tom Brady had some excellent throws in that game. And those 2 touchdowns to Rob Gronkowski. How about the fact that Brady and Gronkowski have combined for 13 playoff touchdowns? And with the short NFL careers that people have, and have players aren't typically with teams for very long, for a quarterback tight end combo to have 13 touchdowns is absolutely insane. Just got to get that out of the way. This team, go ahead.
I don't know. I was going to say, to me, it's crazy because obviously, you think about it, Gronk steps away as well. Now he comes back and he really started getting himself back into shape and really playing well towards the end of the year. And what it really makes me want to think now going in the next season, are we going to start seeing that Gronk that we saw before, obviously just weighing less and really he is faster than what he was before as a result? Or are we going to turn around and we're going to see, the offense change? Because I would imagine Bruce Arians is not coming back. I think the retirement rumors are going to be true because I don't think there hasn't been an announcement about that yet, right? No. So I think they're pretty true, but we're not going to jump to conclusion on that yet. But no matter who the head coach is for moving forward for this Bucs team is going to be interesting. And I think Gronk is going to start getting involved more. And, you mentioned 13 touchdowns. I'm pretty sure there's no other quarterback tight end with that many more. I think that's already a record.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Yeah, so in terms of the combination, I think they have 5-6 more in them. I really do. I think that we're going to see 20 plus when it's all said and done. I mean, Gronk definitely has a lot more years left. And Brady really, again, years ago, we said he wants to play till he's 45. Maybe he wants to play till he's 60 now. Who knows? But, there's definitely a lot of time left, a lot of combinations, and it's something special. I've never seen it before in this league, but those two just have a connection some way, somehow, big game, and they get it done.
So let's talk about the other side now. The Kansas City Chiefs. People thought this was going to be a lot closer. We all did. All four of us on the Super Bowl preview last week said this game was going to be separated by 7 points or less, as did most of the experts. And it really surprised everyone that it turned out this way. And we've already alluded to how strong the Tampa Bay defense was. Patrick Mahomes did not have a great game. He was running for his life, but still, let's be honest, a lot of his throws were off target, even the times that he wasn't pressured. So there's a lot of people that now are starting to draw comparisons between Mahomes and Russell Wilson because they followed a similar path. Their first year, they lost in the playoffs. Their second year, they win a Super Bowl pretty safely. And then the third year, they lose to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Now, I don't know how much further Patrick Mahomes is going to mirror Russell Wilson's career. Honestly, not saying anything bad here about Russell Wilson, but if Patrick Mahomes' career is just to mirror Russell Wilson, that's a disappointment with what we've expected to see with Patrick Mahomes. Now, Andy Reid, he's still, his entire career, the one thing he cannot do is beat the New England Patriots. You can think about it all the way back when he was the coach of the Eagles, and that talented Philadelphia team with Terrell Owens couldn't beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So many times that with the Chiefs, he's lost to New England, and now again gets outsmarted here by Tom Brady. Like he cannot beat Tom Brady. That's the name of the game here. And it's really frustrating because many people thought the Chiefs could finally be that team that goes back-to-back with Super Bowls, which I believe would be the first ones since maybe Washington when Joe Gibbs was their coach. Like, that's such a difficult feat. But where does Kansas City go from here? They still have a lot of young guys. They still have a lot of talent. But how does Kansas City come back and rebound after this really brutal, underwhelming performance in the Super Bowl?
Well, I think you have to go and you have to directly focus on the offensive line. And I know, obviously, that's the obvious look after that game. But, I mean, when your depth and your backup is Mike Remmers, yeah, listen, as a Giants fan, we saw how bad Remmers was. In Super Bowl 50, we saw how bad Mike Remmers was. But I understand, hey, he's still a good substitution effective tackle as a backup, but the realism is that team lacks young offensive linemen. Eric Fisher's been in this league for what feels like forever, and I think he was, 2012, 2011, maybe 2013 class, now that I think about it. But still, I mean, it feels like he's been here forever. And Eric Fisher's been great for the record. I'm not saying he's done bad, but the point is that they have players that have been in the league forever, it feels like. And you got to start getting younger. Teams in general, and I know the Bucs right now, I guess you could say, are a little bit of an anomaly, even though they have a mix of age and youth. But teams that get older and don't make much change consistently tend to fall off. And we talk about this in all sports, baseball in particular, especially. We talked about the complacency, for example, the Yankees. We talked about it for the Astros and so many other teams. Here, we were looking at in football. There's teams that, don't make moves. And then what happens? You start falling apart. I feel like the Chiefs, after that Super Bowl last year, did get a little bit complacent. They did make a couple big signings, but in spots that they needed to, again, tight cap space, you need to re-sign big players. Let's not ignore that. But the fact that there's opportunity to improve on that offensive line, they didn't really do that this last offseason. So I think this year they will address that. I think that the big re-signings that they're going to have to make, they'll take care of that too. And I think the Chiefs will be okay moving forward. It's just a matter of how good can you make that offensive line and how much are these young players that you're going to bring in learn? Because they don't really need receiver help. The defense, I mean, listen, I understand you have 31 points, but 31 points in today's NFL really is nothing. Steve Spagnuolo called a pretty great game considering for how little the Chiefs had the football in terms of time and possession. So give that defense a lot of credit. They continue to play. I'm also intrigued to see. I think Honey Badger's a free agent this year, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to see how much they pay him to return. Obviously, the contract with Jones, because they gave him an extension, is very high money consuming. So I'm eager to see how they pay the rest of that defense around. But overall, they got to focus on that O-line and get better. Otherwise, this Chiefs team is not going anywhere anytime soon in terms of a upward slope. They're just going to stay right where they are. Good team in the AFC, but no progression.
So last thing, a little out of the box. Super Bowl halftime show from the weekend. Rated out of 10 here, Tim.
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I didn't watch it.
Really?
I didn't watch it.
Really?
I just couldn't. Something about maybe just being a sports fanatic. I like the pace of the game. That's what drives energy for me. When you get a break, you lose me. To be honest, what I've seen in the reviews and such, I have seen the meme. That I will say. I have seen the meme. That is almost 10 out of 10. But, really, last time I think I watched a Super Bowl halftime, like full on, was maybe Left Shark. But, I care about the game. That's all I really care about. A lot of people are like, the halftime show is entertaining. But I'm an emotional person in terms of I like the pace. I like the energy. I like the feel of the stadium. And that's why I love going to Yankees postseason games, because you get that feel. You get that every single emotion. And when you get to halftime and you get the break, it's like, all right, well, here we are. And to be honest, the halftime show, I think it was Lady Gaga back when the Falcons had that big lead against the Patriots. Mm-hmm. And, for example, that killed the whole mood of halftime for me. Of like, all right, well, it's a one-sided game, I guess. At least there's this. And I didn't even watch it. But it's like, at least there's this. But then you start to get a good feel for the Patriots and their comeback. And it's like, wow, you have energy again. I feel this was the same exact scenario in this game where it was one-sided. And it's like, all right, halftime was great. I mean, it wasn't bad from what I've read and what I've heard. But personally didn't see it, didn't care much for it. But based upon what I've read, I'd say maybe a 6, 7. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't the best.
Yeah, I mean, there's some historic ones like Michael Jackson that everybody's talked about. But you know what? For the casual fan who might have thought this game maybe wasn't the most entertaining, who was expecting the offensive shootout and didn't get it from the Kansas City Chiefs offense, I think it was a nice little reprieve. But let's move on now. We're going to be joined by Joshua Franks in a moment to talk about the upcoming NASCAR season. All right, so let's get cracking. The NASCAR season after 3 long months is going to be getting started. We've already seen some action in the Clash, the duels, the truck race, the Daytona 500 coming up this weekend. We're joined by Joshua Franks here to help preview this season. But Tim, let's first talk a little about the truck race, because right before we got on the air, you were a little animated about your DraftKings fantasy lineup and how a couple of big ones at the end kind of threw everything off.
Yeah. DraftKings gets a little bit frustrating, but the trucks definitely get frustrating. We spent 90-something laps, I want to say 95 laps, if I'm not mistaken, with a 200-point lead. And then everything fell apart. Austin Hill fell apart. The only one I think that didn't fall apart was Jordan Anderson. You had Johnny Sauter, who absolutely crashed the car. Um, Kraus, don't know what happened to him, but he just kind of stopped driving in the last 20 laps, ended up finishing 33rd. And I forgot who else I had that finished 31st and 32nd. But the point is this. What irritates me the most is that as a unit, this race was so good at the beginning, and everyone raced great for the first 90 laps. And then everyone's going for it. And that's not the problem. But how can you have so many accidents in so many different spots of the track that it's like, listen, when the cup cars crash, for example, we know what spot it's going to be typically. It's always the same spots every time. But for trucks, I don't know if it's just because how the trucks are designed or, whatever. But it seems like every single time when they have a crash, it's on a different spot of the track and it's a new place that we've never seen before. And it gets frustrating because I know Daytona is unpredictable. But there's 10 funded trucks on a track at a time. You can figure out who's the good ones of the bunch. Yet somehow, some way, they all still find a way to crash, and you can't predict the series if you wanted to. That's the most frustrating part to me. The race overall, great. I thought 3 different people were going to win on the last lap. I thought Anderson was going to win. I thought
Corey Roper.
Roper, thank you. I thought he was going to win. And ultimately, when it was all said and done, the ending still again ended up being pretty good, but a massive disappointment for me. And I'm interested to see how Xfinity turns out today as well.
Yeah, but before we get to you, Franks, just truck races in general, Daytona, it's the same story every time. Everybody crashes. There's always like really stupid accidents that happen where everybody just drives into everybody. And I mean, Tim, it's to be expected. Let's be honest here. Half the drivers in the field are younger than you. So we've got a lot of inexperience out here on the track. Joshua Franks, how about your impressions from the truck race last night?
The truck race, in my opinion, it was very exciting. Going through not even just to go over how aggressive everybody was and stuff like that. It was very fun to watch. I was watching it side by side while we were doing a watch party / podcast last night. But watching that and seeing how the truck races and how everybody was varying around, also how different drivers performed. I was happy to see Jordan Anderson do well. Again, that post-race interview was godly. But overall, all the different trucks that were able to get up front and show how well they were able to do. Roper was a shocker to be able to be up there, and he competed very well as well. So looking at how the rosters have shaped out after the offseason and coming into this race, it was a very good race overall, and it was very exciting to watch, and I'm excited to see what happens going forward.
So let's shift gears now to the Daytona 500, but the first topic is the duels, because there was a lot of controversy that happened in that race. And I think it really boils down to the issues with the charter system. That there are going to be 4 Rick Ware racing cars, 3 of which really showed no speed whatsoever in the duels, including Derek Cope, who nearly caused a massive accident on the final lap of the race. Yet Ty Dillon, who was finished 6th in his duel, misses the race. So Tim, do you think there are serious amends that need to be made to this charter system heading into the next gen, especially when you know there's going to be new buying groups that are going to be interested in the car and that are going to start trying to buy these charters?
Well, I think it's more the fact that I think NASCAR just needs to go back to 43 cars and how they had it initially. To me, the fact that only 4 cars of the non-charters can race their way in and quote unquote race their way in, to me, it kind of takes away from the fact, this year was the most in a long time we've seen the Daytona 500 entries, but the fact that you have people buying charters left and right, buying spots in the field, to me, if you're going to have a charter system, it should not be viable. It's linked to a number, linked to a team, and at the end of the day, if you don't qualify in terms of, being a charter, tough luck. So you got to race in. I don't care if you're a funded team or not. because this is what I think is what creates the problems at the end of the day, is that you have teams, for example, you already mentioned it, Derek Cope and Rick Ware buying these spots in, and their cars can't even drive the speed of the pace car. I mean, Derek Cope literally, and I know we've seen some crazy incidents in the past, especially at Talladega with Kevin LePage, but Derek Cope could have really killed someone in that duel. And, you know, I'm glad nothing happened, but that could have been a tragic, tragic outcome. And the fact of the matter is, though, is that going back to the NASCAR point, especially with Ty Dillon, you cannot have someone finishing sixth in the duel, second highest finisher, and not making the Daytona 500. And by the way, the highest finisher of all those drivers that weren't locked in racing in the duels. To me, it's unacceptable. And we saw the outcome twice for the record, because we also saw David Reagan win the second one, and Kaz Grala, who crashed the car, ends up still making the Daytona 500. So to me, you got to change it. Either go back to the increase of 43 cars in the field, but then at the same time, make the results. If you want to keep a 2 spots for speed, that's fine. Go for it. But at least have the duels have some impact. Because then why are we racing the duels? There's no point. If you're telling me the fastest cars in qualifier, if they get the top spot, that then it goes back to the next car in speed, then what was the point of those guys racing physically in the duel? It's pointless. It takes away the whole point of a race other than setting a starting lineup, which, if I'm being honest, half of those drivers, especially the ones locked in, don't even care about. So at the end of the day, NASCAR's got to make that change, and that's the most important part, because otherwise we're going to be stuck with the same questions every year. And if I'm being honest, it was the dumbest maybe 2-3 hours I've watched of trying to learn NASCAR, because this to me was like braille of what I've seen, because I don't think we've seen an instance like this before, but most certainly this weekend they exposed a broken aspect of speedways.
Certainly. Like, the fact that Ryan Preece and David Reagan had already clinched their spots and then they could lock in again through the duel just made no sense. It completely takes out the meaning of the race. Frank's, your opinions on all this?
Overall, and we even discussed this last night, the whole reason the charter system, in my opinion, was implemented, and I think it was pretty much a known fact, was to get rid of the start and parks that originally plagued NASCAR, just so cars could go in, run 5 laps and park and get an easy paycheck out of that and try to go on to next week. I feel like this system's just as broken, especially when Rick Ware, who obviously doesn't, that whole team doesn't care to put good equipment on the track, competitive equipment on the track, shall I say. When they don't do that, it's an embarrassment to the sport. It's an embarrassment overall to the rest of the guys who are actually trying out there, trying to get a spot in the Daytona 500. Guys like Ty Dillon, who in my opinion is still one of the top guys out there, who is struggling to find a cup ride after his team shut down last year. It's an overall embarrassment that him and that 96 did not get in over Derek Cope or 2 other Rick Ware cars that got out-qualified by trucks last night.
Well, can I just add one more thing to that, too? Just think about this. I really, after the Daytona 24, I'm really starting to question what Rick Ware is capable of and what they're not capable of with that team in general. Because they turned around, and I think this was the first year they built a full Daytona 24 car. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But the fact that they were able to build a car good enough that was able to finish 3rd in class with no problems and was pretty much funded and almost competing for a win at the end of the day. The fact that they can't put together a NASCAR that can actually be up to speed really makes me concerned, because it shows that team has money, tag to your point, Franks. It shows that team has money and the capability. They're just choosing not to, and instead Rick Ware's taking 4 cars, putting them on the track as cheap as possible and getting a paycheck. And to me, it's almost like putting a Make-A-Wish team together in terms of, hey, you want to ride? Sure, you can have one, because they're doing that with Derek Cope right now. Hey, you want to ride? Whatever. And then you have Cody Ware, who isn't even driving for Rick Ware Racing. Essentially, I mean, he has the name, but it's Petty Ware Motorsports, and he's in a Chevy. that's a lot. It seems to be a lot more funded than the rest of the 3 cars. So to me, it's like they're just trying to take a paycheck and walk out through. And to your point, it is kind of embarrassing because at the end of the day, it's going to cause problems. And this is not what the sport needs.
And it's just continued to grow each year. I mean, Rick Ware Racing has been the center of memes ever since that 500, I believe 3 years ago, when they caused that massive accident and took out Jimmy Johnson coming onto pit road. And it just seems like every year there's more and more Rick Ware cars. It's all confusing. They have all different manufacturers. They're rarely sponsored. Sometimes they do get some sponsors. They do have some nice paint schemes. But overall, and then the fact that they got involved with premium motorsports last year, there were times when they had 6 cars, technically, that Rick Ware was supervising. Like, that's not good. And you understand the strategy in some ways. They want to get these charters and secure them so they have them for next gen, so that when the cars might be a little cheaper to build, they have those and can hopefully find success. But for now, it's really a detriment to the sport. But let's actually shift gears now to the actual Daytona 500 and talk about the cars that are actually going to be a factor in that race. So the 500, Alex Bowman got up on the pole. William Byron loses his front row spot after a wreck in the duel. Austin Dillon moves up. I'm going to start with you, Franks. Who are some drivers that you're watching for in the 500, and who's your ultimate pick to win?
A lot of guys that showed out in the dual races, from Bubba Wallace. He was able to show up with the rest of the Toyotas. I'm also looking at Christopher Bell. He really impressed me in that number 20 Camry, as well as looking at guys like Austin Dillon, of course, is always a guy that you can look at to possibly win one of these races in that RCR equipment. All of Hendrick Motorsports has shown great speed, but of course you can't sleep on the Fords. Penske has always been up there, especially with the experience of Logano and Brad Keselowski. Those guys, even though they butt heads a lot of guys know that, you know, aggression wins races, and that team is very aggressive when it comes to these races. So there's a lot of guys throughout the field that could possibly win this one. When I look throughout the whole field at guys that could possibly end up being the guy in victory lane, I'm looking at one who was successful at Talladega and almost won it there. And I can't doubt against him. I mean, I don't know how many times this will be for him, but going into the 500 this year, I'm looking at Matt DiBenedetto in that 21 car. He's shown great speed at a lot of different restrictor plate tracks, and coming here to Daytona, I think this could be another possible chance he can get that first Cup Series victory.
And let's not forget how the last time we were at a plate track, Matt DiBenedetto really had a win taken away in that controversial ending with Denny Hamlin, but he's shown a lot of speed. Of course, 2 years ago, led the most laps in the 500. Let me go through my picks now. I think the Hendrick cars are going to be fast. Kyle Larson has kind of been under the radar. It seems like almost the broadcasters don't really want to talk about him this week, but I think he's going to start to pick up some speed now that he's getting used to being back in the car. We know the other 3 Hendrick cars are going to be fast. Like Frank's mentioned, Penske, always really strong at these tracks, especially Ryan Blaney. I think Blaney's going to be a factor. He had such a good year at the plate tracks last season. I also think Ryan Newman's going to have a good race. A little redemption coming back after his horrifying accident last year. He really didn't miss a beat last year coming back from the crash and really performed exactly as we had expected and was in the picture at Talladega back in the fall. So I think Newman could have a chance in this race. And obviously Bubba Wallace, a lot of storylines with him. But how about Daniel Suarez too, by the way? He showed a lot of speed in his duel. He's also with the new team Trackhouse, that has funding from Justin Marks and Pitbull. So I think he's got some decent speed. But my pick to win this, I'm going to go with Eric Almirola. He came so close 3 years ago. He showed a lot of speed. He won his duel. The Fords have been pretty fast so far, especially him and Kevin Harvick. I think Almirola is going to be able to work with Harvick, maybe even work with the Penske guys a little bit, and get in position and get redemption from 3 years ago. So I've got Almirola winning the Great American Race. Tim, how about you?
You know, it's going to be tough because Almirola was one of the guys, too, to mention that I really think when you talk about super speedway specialists, he's one of them who knows how to survive, be the right place, right time. And I think that 10 car is a lot of speed compared to a lot of the Haas cars this weekend. You know, he really shined, and you could tell once he's out there in front of the draft, he can control the lead. I'm a little bit nervous about Alex Bowman, if I'm being honest. No, it's not an engine issue they're reporting. But again, when you have problems and you don't go to a backup car, there's a lot of nerves about things could still go wrong. And if they haven't figured out that vibration issue going into the next hour and a half today, they're going to have to go to a backup car, in my opinion. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, you don't want to mess around here. You spent so much time during speed weeks putting a car together, being here at Daytona. If you have a car that's wrong, it's going to be a problem. And especially starting from the pole position, it could create havoc. I think Bowman will be fast, but if there really is an issue, I don't know how his race is going to go. And we'll see if he plays survival. Otherwise, I do expect him to be fast. However, none of you guys mentioned the guy who's won here so many times, Denny Hamlin. Expect him to be a factor at the end. Denny's trying to make it 3 in a row. He's been great throughout the entirety of speed weeks as well. I mean, Matt 11 always has a lot of speed. Same thing as well. Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski doesn't get wrecked again for the 200th time in the 500. You know, I really think those two are going to be great plays as well, coming down to the wire. But I guess the real big question for both of you guys is, when do we see the big wreck that wipes out half of the field? And how many cars do we think are going to be at the end of this deal racing for the win?
I'll go first here. I think it's going to be a similar style to these last couple years where stages 1 and 2, maybe one incident, but pretty clean. I think stage 3, once the action picks up, it's going to be just like the truck race. We're going to see more and more wrecks towards the end. More and more cars are going to disappear. If I put in my prediction here, I'm going to say the big one happens with 9 laps to go. Takes out 15 cars, but I do not think anybody's going upside down this year. They did lower the horsepower significantly after the Newman wrecks to try to keep these cars on the ground, at least with the Cup cars. I don't think anybody's flipping over this year, but I think we're going to get a big crash with about 10 laps to go. Franks, how about you?
I think it's going to be around the same time they cut to Larry Mack to ask about the average lap of the last caution. But it's going to be in the final few laps, of course, when everybody's trying to get it picked up. We've seen that in the past years where we've gone, I believe, in the overtime, the last 2 years, in which these guys are really going to have to be prepared for those overtime runs. We see it all the time. So it's going to be within the final few laps, and I see it taking around, you know, the same amount of guys out, around 10 to 15 guys being involved, just because, I mean, we've seen it with the Ross Chastain incident at the Daytona night race, and now coming into the Daytona 500, I think we could see it again, a similar style incident.
So last thing here, let's talk about our way too early Final Four predictions and our eventual Cup champion this season. I'll get started here. I think Chase Elliott's making the Final Four. I think he's really going to take advantage of the number of road courses. He is the best road course driver, I think, right now in the Cup Series. Truex is a close second, but Elliott, I think, has really surmounted himself as the number 1 road course guy. So I think he's making the Final Four. I think a big bounce back year for Kyle Busch as well. He only had 1 win last season. He's already won the Clash this year, and he showed speed at the Daytona road course. I think Busch is going to have a nice bounce back season. I think Penske is going to get 1 car into the Final Four. I think it's going to be Logano. I think Joey Logano, he got off to a good start last year, then had a bit of a slow stretch heading through the postseason. But I think Joey Logano will make the Final Four. And lastly, I think it's going to be a big year once again for Kevin Harvick. I think Harvick, I know sometimes after he has a year where he wins a bunch of races, then he has a quiet season, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Harvick is going to come back with the surge of momentum, frustrated with how last season ended. So I think it's going to come down to Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, and Kevin Harvick. And my champion this season, I think Kyle Busch is going to get his 3rd NASCAR championship and start to add to his legacy as a driver. Of course, Tim, we've had the debates before about where Kyle Busch stacks up all time. I've been a little hard on him about the 200 wins with the trucks and Xfinity, but 3 championships speaks a lot, and I think he could get his 3rd this year. Tim, how about you? What are your Final Four and your ultimate champion?
You know, this year I think that we're going to see a good little mix of what we saw last year in terms of the driver's successful. And I think that, again, we're going to see, you know, the 4-car come out, dominate a bunch. I think that we're going to see the 11 be effective. And we're also going to see Kyle Busch really take a step up as well with having a couple opportunities to practice at certain tracks. But in terms of the Final Four, I agree. I think Kyle Busch has a step up year this year. I think he's going to make it in. I think we'll see Joey Logano return as well. Keselowski may be a tough cut, so I don't necessarily have him. I'd like to say Chase Elliott as well is going to return, and I'm going to say the last car in would be Denny Hamlin again. When it's all said and done as the champion, to be honest with you, I want to agree. I want to say Kyle Busch can get it done, but I'm going to say this year is Kevin Harvick's year. Harvick needs that second championship to really prove himself after a year like last year where he dominates so much just to not even make the Final Four. He has a lot he needs to prove this year. He's starting to get older, really creeping up towards retirement age. So he needs to get it done, and he needs to prove that he has what it takes to be a legend in this sport.
Yeah, it's crazy to think now Harvick is the oldest full-time Cup driver and the biggest veteran in the series. Also, I was looking at something else. It's crazy to think now Martin Truex Jr. is now the fourth longest tenured Cup Series driver behind Harvick, Newman, and Kurt Busch. Crazy to think how much changeover there's been in the Cup Series. Frank's finally your Final Four and your championship pick.
Y'all mentioned a lot of the guys that have been regularly up there. I think the youth or the new upstarts coming into the Cup Series, guys getting these top series rides, I think it's going to be a breakout year for all of those guys. Like you mentioned, I think it's a sure shot for Chase Elliott this year to go back to the Final Four. You mentioned the road courses that are in his wheelhouse. He's been coming into his element after a couple of years of development and has shown to be the leader of that Hendrick Motorsports camp. I see Hendrick also getting another car in the Final Four. I've seen a lot of improvement with Alex Bowman over the year. Them going into the 48 this year. I think Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott both can make the Final Four this year. Also really like Denny Hamlin. After last year, how he was able to dominate, I think he could be that representative for Joe Gibbs to possibly go in there and win the title. I think this could be another deja vu style year for him, going to get multiple wins and being a powerhouse for the Joe Gibbs Racing camp. When it comes to the Ford, it's going to be shocking. I don't see Harvick going back. I see this kind of as a regression period now. Last year was kind of one of those things that just punched them straight in the gut after being so dominant, now dropping down. So that's going to be very demoralizing for that team. I don't see them going back. I see them at this kind of as a rebuilding and restacking year, trying to get moving forward again. But when it comes to the Ford camp, of course, there's always going to be somebody that's representing them. When I look at it, I actually think that Joey Logano, like Eddie mentioned, Ryan Blaney's going to be a close second in my opinion because Ryan Blaney's been coming into his element. But I think Joey Logano is going to be back there at Phoenix trying to race for the title. He's shown great strides, and Penske has really been backing him to become the new number one driver there.
All right, so let's wrap things up today. Joshua Franks also hosts the Xperts of Racing podcast. Tell us a little more about that and where people can find it.
It's been a dream pretty much for me to be able to run a podcast. I've been doing it with guys like Bulls Fan 88, Repeat 1975, guys like that. That's been really backing us. We recently just got a partnership with morethanthecape.org. You can go check them out in that story. It's a nonprofit it's a cancer foundation to help out families with kids with cancer who are trying to stay on their feet. It's a great story for those guys. But it's just a bunch of guys sitting down, just talking about their love of sports, whether it's football, racing, whatnot. Just being able to get together and just share our thoughts and opinions on what's going on in the world of sports nowadays. Recently, we just sat down with the ladies of NASCAR with the Fast Lap podcast, talking to Chrissy and Deb from the Fast Lap podcast, and getting their views on it. And it was a very fun podcast. We actually recorded it last night, and now it's on our YouTube channel, which you can see. It's the Xperts of Racing, spelling gamertag Expert Racing. And then, of course, you can check us out on Twitter at Expert Racing, or on Instagram, the same thing, Expert Racing on Instagram. So definitely, we're looking to get Blake Cook and Jesse Awuzie on pretty soon. So it's going to be fun to sit down and talk with those guys, and a lot more exciting things coming forward, and we can't wait for it.
All right, well, great to hear. Franks, thanks for joining us today to preview the NASCAR season.
No problem.
All right, that'll wrap up today's show. Until next week, for Tim Moore, I'm Eddie Kalegi. We'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed, as this is Sports Speak.